All right, so we're going to quickly vlog a demo because he's doing the 317 video for the release. But since he's away, I thought we'd just turn this into a TLDR and use it so everyone could benefit. Just kill my. So I just wanted to run through basically the features, the Java features anyway, that are going to make it into 317 as much for Rob so we can demo this in the video, but for anyone who's testing this as well, I think this will be beneficial. So to start with, the virtual machine that I'm in is something you can create for yourself. We have this Duke Legion project in our Octopus instance. And when you build that or when you run that, it's going to go through and create an EC2 instance that is all configured up with Wildfly, Tomcat, and a couple of other application servers. You'll get Java and you'll get desktop shortcuts to everything to make it really easy. So basically, if you're looking at testing this, basically just run these builds from Octopus, and you'll either get Windows Server or we got one for CentOS and one for Ubuntu. And you can just grab the IP address from the logs. So as you can see here, this one here is actually the one that I'm logged into at the moment. So that makes it really easy to get the infrastructure side up and running, and that's not really what we're testing. So if you just want to point and click and get up and running, that's the best way. Also, I want to point out we have some docs. These aren't public yet, but this will be useful for those who are testing. So we do have, it is pretty comprehensive at this point, and that's just available on GitHub. So I'll email that link around, and you guys can look at that as well. So to kick it off, there's a few different steps that we have added. And that's these guys here. So we have the ability to deploy applications to both Tomcat and Wildfly. We have the ability to start and stop or enable or disable applications in those application servers. And then we have a package deployment, which is basically just a file copy of the package to anywhere that you like. So in a way, we have sideways support for other application servers like WebSphere or Glassfish or whatever, as long as they support the ability to boot an application after it's been copied into a directory, then they can make use of this. So the first one that I want to run through is the ability to deploy to Wildfly. Wildfly and EAP are basically the same thing. Wildfly is the open source free version of the application server, and EAP is just the commercial instance. So they're basically all referred to, and they all refer to in the same sentence, and they all use the same steps. So if you're deploying to Wildfly, it's pretty straightforward. You just select the package that you want to deploy. We now support uploading jars, wars, ears, and ras to the built-in library. And so this is a WAR file that has been uploaded previously. You then set a couple of fields. So this one here allows you to change the name that the file gets when it's uploaded into Wildfly. So if this was blank, it would just be uploaded as replacement demo.1.0.0.war. Because we've specified a new file name, it will actually show up in the deployment manager as that. And that has some implications as to the context that the application gets. So because we've named this application.war, the file will actually be available under the context of application. And so we do have some documentation here on how contexts are assigned in Wildfly, and it's sometimes not as straightforward as you might think. So it either takes on the name of the context either matches the file name. Root.wire is a special one, or you can override it all with a setting in this file here. And we'll see how that's important later on. But getting back to here, so this is optional and you can set it if you want. This is the IP address of the Wildfly server as it appears from the tentacle. So because the tentacle is almost always on the same box as the Wildfly server, it's probably going to be localhost. The ports, typically the default would normally be 9990, but because this VM hosts like half a dozen application servers, we've had to juggle the ports around. The documentation for the ports is all in the README file for the repo that holds the Ansible code. So these are all the ports that we've exposed for the various application servers that we test against. So this defines the protocol that you use to connect to Wildfly. This is not as straightforward as it should be. We've mentioned some of the defaults here. They've actually just changed, I think, recently. So I should change these because these have been deprecated. I think it's remote plus HTTP and remote plus HTTPS, but the two are equivalent. Again, you can find more about that in the docs. So here we go. We've got some notes on what the various kinds of protocols that are expected in this field. Username and password, this is actually optional in most cases. The login will attempt to do silent authentication, which uses access to a directory on the local file system to verify that the code has permission to run. Otherwise, it's just the username and password that is set up for the admin console. The application can be deployed in an enabled or disabled state. And these two fields here define the server groups in a domain setup that the application will be deployed to. So in this case, we're actually deploying to a standalone instance, and these don't make any sense. They just won't be used. It's this field here that is important. If we were deploying to a domain controller, and this is an example of a domain controller. It has the notion of server groups, and this is where you would list the name of the server group that you're deploying to. So we do support the variable substitution. In this case, we have a properties file that has a field that we expect Octopus to replace, and that is exposed here. So in the properties of this project, we'd have an environment set to Wildfly, and so that field is getting replaced and the package is getting rebuilt and then deployed. We can look at Tomcat next. So most of the fields are fairly similar. Again, we're just selecting the package. Tomcat has a slightly different notion of how it defines the context path. In this case, it doesn't come from or doesn't necessarily come from the file name or a file in the package. We define it here, so we can deploy to the root context with a /, or we can have you can find something else as the context for your app. Tomcat also has the notion of it includes its own versions for deployed packages. So if you look in the manager here, you can see it assigns its own versions to packages. And this is important because of the parallel deployment feature. So if I was to deploy an app, if I was to deploy this app with a higher version, what would happen if parallel deployments were enabled is that any existing traffic or any people who have a session against this version would continue to use this version, whereas new traffic would get assigned to the next version up. And then as people drop off the old version, like as their sessions expire, eventually it'll reach 0, and you have the option of then just having Tomcat delete the old version. So the versions that you assign, or the Tomcat versions that you assign, are quite important. And we can here, we've just used the version assigned to the package, although potentially you could just use a release number or a timestamp. It's really up to you. Again, details of the interface that we're going to use, and this is all relative to the Tentacle. Tomcat does require username and passwords, and you can start and stop the deployment. And it supports also the replacement of variables. So something that is good to keep an eye out if you're testing is that we've made quite a big effort to include a lot of unique error codes for situations where the deployment fails. So the idea is that people can, these are easily Googleable, like these are only ever going to show up as part of our project. And in our docs, we do have some additional information that people can use to debug the issue. So in this case, we've received the 0007 error, which is a generic, there was an error deploying this to the server. But there are some cases or some common conditions that may lead to this. And in this case, we're saying, well, this might be because of duplicate context paths. So how do we go and check that? Well, if we look at the docs again, so we can see that this file here allows us to define the context path. And if two apps have this same context path defined, we're going to run into an error. And we can quickly verify if that's the case by checking out the content of the deployed application. So right off the bat, we can see that this file exists. So let's have a look at it. Yep, so we've defined a context path, and there's a good chance that this deployment failed because the context path was duplicated for a second deployment, and this project here was actually set up exactly to demonstrate that issue. But we do have a whole bunch of these error codes that basically accompany almost every step of the deployment process. So if you do find an error and these are not descriptive enough, or you've found a situation where there is a repeatable error, just let us know and we'll add these details to the docs. And hopefully people who Google it in future will just have a quick and easy reference for any particular issues. We have said up front that this release will only support Wildfly, JBoss, EAP, and Tomcat. But for giggles, I've also set up WebSphere and Payara on these servers just to make sure that the copying of packages works. So this is an example of the Java package deployment. So this will change. We do have to add the ability to copy the exploded contents of the archive. So this UI will change a little bit. But in this case, we're just taking a package and installing it into a directory. And in this case, that would be the WebSphere application server. And it has the ability to deploy applications just by copying them into this drop-ins folder. And again, there's a variable substitution. So we can see that this all works. So this is the app that was deployed to WebSphere, just to prove that it is WebSphere. And we've done the same thing for Payara. So we do have, I guess at this point, unofficial support for application servers that support deploying apps through file copies. So that's a pretty quick high-level rundown of the kinds of steps and the kinds of functionality that we've exposed for this release. And hopefully I think we're on track for a bug bash in the next couple of days, I believe. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. Do you guys have any questions? Rob, was that enough for your video?
That's huge. There's that looks really, really good, and there's a lot about the Java application servers I don't know. So
Yeah.
I'll be peppering you with questions, but things it looks like you've got a lot there, a lot of good support for all the various package types and all those new steps. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, cool. Well, if you have any questions, just let us know.
Oh, definitely.
Just for the Wildfly one, you said the server groups were only available in some cases. Did it make sense to put those behind a toggle for the user to only show them if they've sort of a scenario where that'll happen? Because otherwise it's a wall of fields.
Yeah.
You have to work out your own combination for.
I guess.
Or there's too many permutations.
Well, I mean, there's only really one. You're deploying to standalone or you're deploying to a domain controller.
Yeah, so could that be the toggle then?
You could.
Yeah.
Let me just pull it up.
What is the collapsible section?
Yeah. Yeah, in the new UI, they'll be, they're all sections, but we still have the radio concept within a section where if you, except for the bindings or for the authentication, when you pick a certain authentication, you get the password fields.
Right.
Otherwise you don't see those.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we could have a toggle up above here saying, are you deploying to standalone or
just might make
domain.
a simpler UI for the basic case.
Yeah, that's something we can do. That'd be fairly easy.
For the codes, can you include a link to them in the log? That's what React does in their errors, and it's really nice because you just click on it and it takes you to the page.
Are these links? Can we embed links in our logs? Or they'd have to copy and paste?
They have to
I guess
copy
if you
and paste.
put the link, we just put a link there, even if it's not clickable, if it looks like a web link.
If you put the link in there, we do have an Angular, what do you call it, a directive that will convert links to like text links and finds them and wraps them. So potentially.
But currently in our logs, that doesn't happen. They do just at the moment come out as text, which is still
That's
fine.
what I'm saying. If we wanted to, we could add that.
Yep.
Yeah.
But if it was their
Plain text,
g.octopus.com, whatever our
Yeah.
shortener thing is, people will go, oh, copy
Right.
that, paste it in.
Not bad.
Yeah,
I'll
we can
take
do
it.
that.
I know if you anchor those sections, you'll get right to the error.
Yeah, I think you get do we get? Yeah, we must get anchors in our.
Yeah, don't just
yeah.
wrap them in like the header section. Each of the headers can anchor. Yeah.
So just to confirm, the Java, like that special step for Java, deploying Java package, like that generic one, does that basically bust it open, replace, and then package it back up? Is
Yeah.
that kind of-
So they all steps do that to get the variable replacement. Yeah, it's just that the deployed package may not actually bundle it back together. It will give them the option of just copying the exploded contents.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there any reason you would pick that? Let's say you wanted to just explode it. Is there any reason you would pick that as opposed to just normal deploy?
Some people use exploded deployments. I don't think it's that common, but I know people do it. It's something that's supported by the app servers.
I mean, like
The difference is
deploy
for the
package.
Java step, we actually explode it with the Java tools rather than just extract it as a zip.
But in theory, we could do that if we treated .war separately. Like the way at the moment we treat .zips differently to .nuggets to
That's true.
Because at the moment, presumably, I can select a WAR from the package dropdown. Like we're not doing any sort of smart security. You can only pick a WAR or not a WAR.
No smarts like that. We give you a different list of features that you can choose for the deploy Java archive because a lot of the ones for the deploy package don't make sense, like the .NET configuration, Windows servers, a lot of the things there don't apply. So you just get a customized list of features. But you're right, we could hook up the extraction of the jar file to the deploy package step.
Do we fail early if someone does?
No, we fail late.
Right. So that might be something as well. Like if we're deciding we're not going to provide support for it, at least fail and go, hey, you're trying to use a WAR. Because they might resolve via a variable. Like we might not be able to do it at configuration time.
You can't, the package may not exist.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. We might have to do it at deploy time, but we
I
can
don't
still
even know
tell
if we
at
can do it
deploy
at
time.
deploy time because the package shot's very decoupled.
We know what it is though.
You can say to download it on the tentacle on the tentacle if you like, so you don't even have the package at the time the deployment starts.
But as opposed to trying to break it, like getting through 1, 2, 3 steps in the process and then trying to extract and go, oh, hang on, wait a minute, this is another one.
So
Yeah.
at acquisition time, you mean?
Yeah,
Check
correct.
acquisition.
Correct.
We've got a heap of stuff in current steps that will fail late if it's wrongly configured.
Yeah, but I mean, the difference here is it's not so much a configuration thing as it is we've given them the gun to shoot themselves with, potentially.
Yeah, you can now upload an invalid zip as well.
Again, that's an invalid zip. This is not, we've provided the tools to do something and they've shot themselves. Like, they're doing everything else validly right.
I mean, the easiest thing here might be just to hook it up, right? Hook the Jar package extractor up for the deploy package.
Correct.
So the
Correct.
worst case
That's what I'm saying
is
for that case.
it gets extracted and you get a
But
bunch
the
of
inverse,
mentions that
okay.
don't
I
apply.
suppose I'm trying to be a bit more generic here. The inverse, let's say I do because currently we obviously don't have support for deploying to IIS and JAR.
Yeah.
So potentially fail there, like basically have some sort of knowledge that what package we're using, what steps don't match up and react accordingly.
Yeah,
If that makes sense, having.
but it makes sense. It's just the way we're implemented at the moment. The packages are so decoupled from everything else because the package, remember, can be a variable even in there. You don't even resolve it until.
Correct, but at some point you've got an acquisition phase, right?
Yeah, which can be on the calamari side, on the tentacle.
So we've still got acquisition, and that's before we start stepping through the process. Like
Scripts may run.
Yeah, sure.
I take your point. I feel like the easiest thing is just to make it work, though. Work for some value.
Obviously, if we can make it work, that's the primary thing. But if we can't make it work and we can detect that it won't work, tell them early. If it's impossible to detect that at any point until the point it tries to get used, then sure. But I'm just saying, if we can, it makes sense to.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it seems like the fundamentals are all there. It's just now a matter of tightening the screws a bit. So
Exactly.
I notice as well you've got the configure features link still there. Are there other features, or should we be hiding that? Or
There are features. You can still do variable substitution in files. You can still do JSON substitution.
are all like, do we filter? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can still use a custom directory. Yeah.
Cool.
It's just a curated list.
Cool.
Would that be a case that a package is a password protected?
No. Not
If
that
it
I've
is, it's not
seen.
going to go well.
I mean, you can password protect a raw, right?
No, RAR is just a zip file in this case. It's not the
Not
RAR
RAR.
archive format.
You can password protect a zip file.
We currently don't provide any sort of support for the password, so I wouldn't bother about.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Yeah, it's something new.
The only thing you might run into is signed zips, and we don't give them the ability to re-sign it as it's repackaged. But that's something we're aware of, and there's other functionality we want to put in. This is what's going into 3.17.
Yeah.
So if there is feedback that this is not sufficient, we will be adding it.
Layer it on top. Yeah.
Looks pretty good. That looks pretty all-encompassing.
Yeah.
Yeah, assuming that's all valid stuff that people use. For all I know, you could be making all of this up.
That's right. Just ignore the fact that all these screen sites are just PNGs.
Do you track the usage of the steps, or are you implementing that?
Oh, that's a good point. We have to add. I think all this step usage gets tracked by the. Well,
No, I haven't done anything special for that.
we'll look that up before.
A lot of that's automatically, or a lot of that's done automatically. All you need to do is just update Octofront a little bit. So that's fairly easy. I could always help out with that next week.
Right.
Typically, the process is we forget about usage tracking until about 10 minutes after we ship. Yeah, that's part of our procedure.
Did you have to do it for Docker manually?
I think I know I definitely added it in Octofront because that's where we specifically.
So you have to change Octofront.
I think it is still getting passed back automatically.
I think so.
But we could be getting close to the max URL.
We just expanded it on Octofront. Okay. Sweet. Well, that works.